What's up everyone, and welcome back to the MMA Zone. Today, let's get started with Khamzat Chimaev finds it funny that UFC tried to match Nate Diaz up against him. Nate Diaz is frustrated over the handling of his last fight on his UFC contract. While on the MMA Hour this week, Diaz relayed how he'd been trying to get out of the organization and fight out his contract since he lost a unanimous decision to Leon Edwards in June of 2021. Diaz, ever a fan favorite, said he asked the promotion to fight a litany of fighters from Tony Ferguson to Vicente Luque to Dustin Poirier. The promotion, meanwhile, hasn't budged on any of those names, but Diaz did state that they offered him a fight against Khamzat Chimaev, which, if you remember this tweet, must have happened in early May. This is what Diaz tweeted in late May. "I've been trying to fight for a year and months. I also tried to fight Khamzat for the last month and a half, but he was hurt, had visa issues, overweight, and now his is off getting married instead of fighting. WTF? I'm trying to get a fight with a real fighter ASAP. July. Let's f***ing go." Diaz reiterated those words in a recent interview with Ariel Helwani, where he stated that the UFC asked him if he would take a bout against the Chechen Swede, and he accepted. Then, those plans fell through. Chimaev responded to those comments with a bunch of laughing emojis and a meme describing that Nate Diaz would be in a coffin with Chimaev shutting it. What do you think about the UFC's alleged attempts at trying to get Nate Diaz to fight Khamzat Chimaev? If this fight were to take place, who do you think would win? After UFC London withdrawal, Darren Till airs out his frustrations. The UFC London card on July 23 is packed with some of the best up-and-coming English MMA fighters. One of those names that was set to return for this night was Darren Till, the number 9 ranked middleweight. He was set to take on fellow top 10er Jack Hermansson, ranked number 8 in the division. Till was set to make a comeback, as he's currently on a 2-fight losing skid, including a submission loss at the hands of Derek Brunson last September. But a few weeks ago, Till had to pull out of the fight due to a leg injury. It's unclear when he'll be able to make a return to the cage, but it's just another point in a frustrating past few years for the Liverpool native. Till, a former title challenger at welterweight, is currently on a bit of a skid, having dropped 4 of his last fights dating back to 2018. He believes this is his low point. Case in point, this is what he stated in a recent interview with Block Asset.
And it's just such a depressing time for me at the moment, because listen, trolls don't bother me, but it's just these comments and all these even fighters, and they're like, "Oh, I fucking pulled out," and I'm like, "Mate, come to the gym and I will take you out." It's just so frustrating right now for me, really is. I'm just at a low point, but
while he's still an incredibly popular fighter, in comparison to his ranking and his recent struggles, he's still 29 years old. In the interview, he goes on to state how confident he is in his abilities, and how he knows that there's a big hole he'll have to dig himself out of in order to mount another run at UFC Gold. What do you think about Till's comments here? And do you think he will make another run at the title? Brian Ortega talks about the time Alexander Volkanovski escaped from his mounted guillotine. With a highly anticipated clash set against Yair Rodriguez this upcoming weekend at UFC Long Island, Brian Ortega is doing all kinds of press to promote the event. During his media day press conference for the event, reporters are asking him about the last time he stepped into the octagon. Ortega put on a valiant performance against featherweight champion Alexander the Great Volkanovski back at UFC 266 last September. The title fight earned Fight of the Night honors. Perhaps what people remember most about that bout was the 3rd round, when Ortega locked in a mounted guillotine against the champion that looked like it was completely and utterly on. You can see Volkanovski's head turn red, but somehow he found a way to survive and got out of the choke. And he even came up on top to rain some punches onto Ortega. Ultimately, Volkanovski weathered the submission storm and came away with a unanimous decision win. Now, just days away from his fight against Rodriguez, this is what Ortega stated about that moment.
I sat there and I looked at that tape over and over again. I go, how the did this man get out of that choke? I was on top celebrating. I'll be honest with you, I was in there and I had him in that guillotine and I was just like, I'm about to be a world champ. Like, I swear to, I was just waiting for the tap and it never came. And he got out and I was like, well, this is a tough mother.
Ortega actually locked up a triangle choke later on, but Volkanovski was again able to get out of that submission attempt. However, with that loss now in the rearview mirror, Ortega says that he's been learning from his missteps in that fight, and he praised Volkanovski for constantly improving and always making adjustments mid-fight. And he says that he's taking those lessons away and will try to utilize it against a tough fighter in Yair. This fight could have title shot implications for Yair Rodriguez if he wins, as the UFC has told him he'd get the next shot at the featherweight belt with a win over Ortega. What do you think about Ortega's comments regarding the Volkanovski fight and that submission attempt? Don't forget to take a second to hit that like button and subscribe to the MMA Zone to stay up to date on all of the latest fight news. John Dodson was released after he signed a new UFC deal? Mr. Smiley himself, John Dodson, isn't so happy right now. Few years removed from the UFC releasing him from the organization. The last time the former two-time flyweight title challenger competed in the UFC, he had dropped a unanimous decision to Merab Dvalishvili in a bantamweight fight back in August 2020 at UFC 252. Including that fight, he had dropped 3 of his last 4 UFC bouts, all at bantamweight. But now, 2 years removed from that fight and his release, and having already fought twice out of the organization, he's admitting that the release surprised him. This is what he stated in a recent interview with MMA Junkie about it.
Like, we just renewed. I just renewed my contract, and then they're like, "Hey, you know what? You're out." I was like, "Oh, what the hell?" I was like, "First fight in, and I'm done." Wow. Thanks a lot, you guys.
Dodson, the winner of the Ultimate Fighter Season 14, has since gone on to fight twice for ex-MMA and went 1-1. He's also signed to Bare Knuckle Fighting Championship with a fight scheduled for BKFC 28 on August 27 in Rio Rancho, New Mexico against fellow ex-UFC fighter Ryan Benoit. What's interesting is that prior to Dodson making the jump to bantamweight, Dodson was a stud at 125 pounds. His only losses in that division is to one of the greats, Demetrius Johnson, both title fights. Dodson went on to say that he doesn't really hold any ill will against the UFC, and that he still hopes to make it back to the organization for another run if he can impress in his next few outings. He does guess that the UFC only cut him in order to make room to sign other, younger fighters who will fight for less money. What do you make of this situation regarding Dodson having been released just 1 fight into his new contract back in mid-2020? Alex Pereira talks Israel Adesanya post UFC 276. It only took about half a round for Alex Pereira to knock out top 10 middleweight Sean Strickland at UFC 276 and earn himself a shot at the 185-pound title. Pereira, the only man to have ever knocked out Israel Adesanya, albeit in kickboxing, which took place about 5 years ago, he now has a highly anticipated octagon meeting with Adesanya. And no doubt, the UFC will be promoting the heck out of this fight. While he says in a recent interview he wasn't impressed by Adesanya's performance that night against Jared Cannonier, he did have something to say about his own knockout of Strickland. Case in point, this is what he stated in a recent interview on the Portuguese language podcast Trocação Franca. Of course, he'd never give me props, but what he thinks or doesn't think doesn't change a thing to me. You have to ask him if he was impressed when I knocked him out. Was he not impressed? If he wasn't, he's sick. If he was impressed in his own fight at UFC 276, that's good enough to me. Pereira goes on to say that he's just waiting on the date and location from the UFC about when to fight Adesanya. What do you think about Pereira's comments here? Today's video was packed with some juicy stories from the fight world. What are your thoughts about what's going on in MMA? Don't forget to smash that like button and subscribe to the MMA Zone to see more videos just like this. See you next time.